When you picture the Old West, what comes to mind? Dusty trails, grizzled cowboys, and swinging saloon doors, right? For decades, Hollywood has painted a picture of saloons as rowdy, men-only spaces where whiskey flowed freely and fists flew even more so. But that picture is missing a huge, vital piece of the puzzle: women. The story of the frontier saloon isn't just a man's story. It's a story of grit, business savvy, and survival. And women were right at the heart of it all. Let's be clear, we're not just talking about the stereotypical saloon girl you've seen in movies. While they were certainly part of the scene, the roles women played were far more diverse and powerful than history often gives them credit for. They were shrewd entrepreneurs, entertainers, waitresses, and peacekeepers. They were the civilizing influence in some of the wildest places in America. Forget the myths. Today, we re-pulling back those swinging doors to reveal the true story of the women who didn't just work in saloons. They ran them, shaped them, and in many ways, built the West. The first thing to understand is that a saloon was often the very first business to pop up in a new frontier town, sometimes even before a church or a general store. It was the social hub, the community center, the newsroom, and the deal-making floor all rolled into one. And in this chaotic, male-dominated environment, a woman's presence was a game changer. It wasn't just about glamour. It was about business. A saloon with women working in it was often seen as more respectable, more orderly. Their presence could literally double or triple a saloon's profits. Why? Simple. Men would behave better. They'd spend more money, stay longer, and be less likely to start a brawl if women were around. Saloon owners knew this. An ad from a Denver newspaper in the 1870s even boasted of having the most refined lady servers as a key selling point. These women weren't just pouring drinks. They were managing the atmosphere, de-escalating conflicts, and making the establishment a place where a man would want to spend his hard-earned wages. They were the ultimate social influencers of their time. And let's talk about the business owners themselves. While the law in many states made it difficult for women to own property or businesses, the frontier was different. The rules were looser. An opportunity was there for anyone tough enough to grab it. And many women were more than tough enough. Take Mary Fields, also known as Stagecoach Mary. Born into slavery, she became a legend of the West. While most famous for being the first African-American female star route mail carrier, she also owned and operated her own saloon in Cascade, Montana. She was known for her generosity and her no-nonsense attitude, proving that a woman could command respect and run a successful business in the heart of cowboy country. Then there's the story of Rowdy Joe Lowe and his wife, Rowdy Kate. They were a notorious pair who ran saloons across Kansas. While Joe was the face, Kate was the steel spine of the operation. She was a skilled gambler, an expert shot, and by all accounts, just as tough, if not tougher, than her husband. They moved from one boomtown to another, and their success was a partnership. Kate wasn't just the saloon keeper's wife. She was a co-owner, a business partner who was instrumental in their ventures. These women weren't hiding in the shadows. They were on the front lines, building empires one whiskey at a time. Of course, the most visible women in the saloons were the entertainers and so-called saloon girls. But even their roles were far more complex than the movies suggest. Yes, they were there to entertain the lonely men of the frontier miners, soldiers, and cowboys who were far from home. They sang, they danced, they played the piano, and they provided conversation. For many of these men, a saloon girl might have been the only woman they spoke to for months. This work, however, was often born of necessity. For a woman on the frontier with few options, working in a saloon offered a degree of financial independence that was almost unheard of at the time. A popular entertainer could make far more money than a seamstress or a laundress. It was a dangerous and often looked down upon profession, but it was also a path to self-sufficiency. These women navigated a world of risk and reward, using their charm and wit to survive and, in some cases, to thrive. They were saving money, buying property, and starting their own businesses. They weren't just passive figures. They were active agents in their own lives, making strategic choices in a world that offered them very few. Consider the famous hurdy-gurdy houses. These were dance halls, popular in mining camps, where men paid for a dance with one of the hurdy-gurdy girls. These women, often recent immigrants from Germany or Austria, were professional dancers. They worked hard, maintained a strict code of conduct, and pooled their money. They were a sisterhood, protecting each other and managing their own careers. Far from being exploited victims, many of them were savvy businesswomen who eventually left the dance halls with enough capital to start new lives, open shops, or buy ranches. The presence of women also fundamentally changed the physical space of the saloon. When saloons were men-only affairs, they were rough-hewn, functional places. But to attract a more respectable clientele and to make the female employees feel safer, owners started investing in their establishments. They added curtains, carpets, and elegant furniture. They separated the rough-and-tumble bar area from a more refined wine room or parlor where women could serve customers in a quieter setting. This division was not just for show. It was a key business strategy. The parlor was where bigger deals were made and more expensive champagne was sold. The women who ran these rooms were hostesses, confidantes, and skilled negotiators, often earning a commission and building their own wealth. But it wasn't all business and glamour. The reality was often harsh. The frontier was a violent place, and saloons were frequently the epicenter of that violence. Women in saloons faced constant risks, from rowdy customers to the threat of lawlessness. Their work required immense emotional labor and physical courage. They had to be quick-witted, able to diffuse a tense situation with a joke or a firm word. They learned to read people instantly, to know who was a friend and who was a threat. Their stories are a testament to human resilience. Think of the legendary Madame Fanny Porter, who ran a famous brothel saloon in San Antonio, Texas. She was known for her kindness, her discretion, and her impeccable style. Her establishment was a safe haven for famous outlaws like the Sundance Kid and the Wild Bunch. But she wasn't just a harbor for criminals. She was a beloved figure in her community, known for her charity and for taking care of the women who worked for her, ensuring they received medical care and protection. She navigated a dangerous world with grace and intelligence, building a legacy that has outlasted many of the so-called heroes of the West. As the 19th century came to a close and the Wild West began to be tamed, the role of the saloon began to change. The temperance movement, largely led by women, gained momentum. It's one of history's great ironies. While some women were building their lives inside saloons, others were marching outside, demanding their closure. Figures like Carrie Nation, with her hatchet and her righteous fury, became the face of prohibition. This movement saw saloons as dens of vice that destroyed families and communities. And in some cases, they were right. But this crusade against alcohol often overshadowed the complex reality of the women whose livelihoods depended on these establishments. When the saloons closed, many of the women who had found a rare form of independence, they were left with nothing. Their stories, their contributions, and their economic power were swept aside, first by the temperance movement, and later by a sanitized, male-centric version of history. So when we look back at the Old West, it's time to adjust the frame. The story isn't complete without the women of the saloons. They weren't just side characters in a cowboy story. They were entrepreneurs who spotted a market and filled it. They were entertainers who brought a spark of joy to desolate places. They were survivors who carved out a life for themselves against incredible odds. They were a civilizing force, and they were business partners. They were the unacknowledged architects of the social and economic life of the frontier. The swinging doors of the saloon didn't just lead to a bar. They led to a world of opportunity, danger, and independence. A world shaped and often run by the very women history chose to forget. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let us know in the comments which part of this story surprised you the most. We'll see you in the next one.